Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of my new podcast. My name is Crathan Garricus. I'm the radio voice of your Charlotte Flyers, and this is Flight Tracker. Flight Tracker is my new podcast all about Charlotte's favorite BBA baseball team, the Flyers. I have a lot of exciting plans for the future of the show, but this first episode is going to focus on everything that's happened since the end of the 2057 season. I'll be covering the team's key departures and acquisitions, some important off-season injury news, a look at which roster spots are locked in and which ones are up for grabs during the preseason, and I'll take a look at the first few days of spring training. We have 10 beautiful but meaningless games to dissect. I'll see if I can find anything that might give us some insight into what to expect during the upcoming season, and who might have an early leg up on those open roster spots. The Flyers are coming off their best season in 4 years after having won only 71, 66, and 65 games the previous 3 seasons. Finishing the year with a record of 78 and 84 was a dramatic improvement, but it really only tells part of the story. Charlotte fought through major injuries to key players and stayed in contention for a playoff spot late into September. The idea that the majority of that team returns in 2058, along with a few new players and the hope that maybe some of their stars will be on the field more frequently this year, has the city of Charlotte buzzing. You know that Robert Menzies and Tadataka Yoshikawa each missed 75% of the games last year and never played a single inning on the field at the same time. That fact alone makes the team's success in 57 pretty remarkable. And now, the front office has had a chance to work on things they saw as weaknesses around those two guys, who you have to assume will at least be on the field more this year than last. All right, let's get into it. Here are the players who won't be part of the Flyers in 2058. First up, I'll remind you of 2 big names who were traded away prior to the deadline last year. Mihine Karatu and Ruben Bin-Majid Al-Din were traded to Rocky Mountain in exchange for second baseman Dallas Dixon and young center field prospect Miguel Lucier. Ruben was with the Flyers for the better part of 8 seasons. He did have a losing record during that time at 74 and 89, but he played for some pretty bad teams over that stretch too. His 4.28 FIP and 98 FIP minus tell the story of a man who helped his team and pitched just a little better than league average while he was here. He struck out 16.9% of batters he faced in Charlotte and ended up posting 25.9 more during that time. He was a horse, and his availability to go out there every 5th day and provide 6 solid innings more often than not was a valuable asset to the club. Karatu was only here last season. He played in 121 games and hit well. His .300 batting average and 119 WRC plus and 2.1 WAR paint a picture of a productive player. There wasn't any way the team was going to sign him to an extension, though, so it made a lot of sense to trade him when they did. Once the season was over, catcher Hollis O'Hara declined his contract option for 2058. That move made sense for him, and the Charlotte front office seemed to be fine with the decision as well. It freed up $4.5 million under the salary cap for the Flyers and allowed O'Hara to sign a lucrative deal with Atlantic City. The team decided to cut ties with pitcher Liam Johnston shortly after the season as well. He was due $7 million in 2058 with a team option for $59, including a $1.5 million buyout. After a pretty tough 57 season, the Flyers front office decided it would be more beneficial to pay Johnston to leave and create salary cap flexibility than to keep him on the roster. Johnston has since signed on with Calgary at a more reasonable $1.3 million. The Flyers also decided to release Stan Seymour instead of taking him to arbitration. He was a solid bench player last year who started some games against left-handed pitching. The final big domino to fall was when the team released Rich Dares, who had a very nice season for the Flyers in 57. Dares had far and away the best season of his career, posting 2 WAR. It was only the second time he had put up positive WAR in a season, with the previous high being 0.6. Word is that General Manager Nathan Garrison tried to come to terms with Dares prior to salary arbitration, but the two sides were too far apart, and the team decided to just release him and spend that money elsewhere. The money that the team saved on those 3 deals created enough cap space for Garrison to sign fan favorite Banger the Great Piano Man Dan to a 4-year, $47.4 million contract extension. Dan was originally acquired by Charlotte at the 57 deadline in another deal with Rocky Mountain. The Flyers sent away 2 prospects in that deal to get the established big leaguer. While Dan got off to a solid start with the Flyers, he missed the last few weeks of the season with a strained oblique. Overall, he had an outstanding 57 campaign, and Charlotte will be counting on him to play at that high level again this season. Now I want to look at some players who the Flyers added in the offseason. Up first, we have starting pitcher Carl Vincent. He was picked up in a trade with Atlantic Division rival Charm City for a couple of prospects, including the slick-fielding Jose Valle and 20-year-old pitcher Gabriel Carlos. Vincent is a lefty, which is something the Flyers were lacking in their rotation for pretty much all of 2057. He has a career 67-39 record with a 4.16 ERA. 2057 was not his best year, but he still put up 2.6 WAR and a 92 FIP minus. One knock against Vincent is that he's been injured a lot. Unfortunately for Charlotte, he's already proving that to be true and has landed on the IL. He left his first spring training start with the back pain and was diagnosed with a herniated disc. Team doctors are saying that he's going to miss about 8 weeks. If he can stay healthy once he returns to the rotation, he should help the Flyers win quite a few games. Garrison also pulled the trigger on a trade to bring in the Flyers sent a versatile young defense-first prospect named Paul Parham to Twin Cities in the deal. Yamashita has bounced around between the bullpen and the starting rotation over the last few years. The Flyers seem to want to give him a chance to join the rotation at 58. Despite having an ERA over 5 in 57, Yamashita had some solid underlying numbers. His 4.19 FIP and 94 FIP minus were actually the best of his career, while his 318 BABIP was the second highest of his career, indicating that he may have just run into some bad luck during the season. The third trade made this offseason sent young lefty pitching prospect Eduardo Ramos to San Fernando in exchange for veteran reliever Chris Lacey. Lacey was very good for the Bears the last 3 seasons, with an ERA of 3.46 and a FIP minus of 93 in 112 appearances. Lacey, who seems to be a favorite of Flyers owner John Watson, was brought in to help solidify a bullpen that was a clear weakness of the 2057 version of the club. The team made several other additions, including a number of minor league free agents and 3 players taken in the Rule 5 draft. The minor league free agents who were invited to spring training include outfielder Tommy Rogers and pitchers Jerry Stout, Andrew McLean, Georgi Stanovich, and Walt Cuero. The Rule 5 picks are left-handed hitting catcher Heba Majalawa and a pair of strong defensive outfielders in Mick Scott and Laucom. In late January, the team added catcher Will Bennett and utility infielder Jesus Diaz into the mix through free agency as well. That brings us to spring training. Just as pitchers and catchers were set to report, the team got some bad news. Stephen Best had a setback in his injury recovery and will not be able to return until sometime in the 2059 season. I've actually been alerted to some breaking news on that front. In fact, the Flyers have officially released Stephen Best. He ends his time with the Flyers having only pitched 18 times after being signed to a 3-year, $18 million contract. He will return to free agency, and the Flyers will look to reallocate that money to make the team better in the near term. We all know that spring training games are meaningless. Teams can finish last in the league in the preseason and follow it up with winning their division. With that being said, I still want to look at a few things that took place during the first 10 games of Charlotte's spring. Game 1 was against the Boise Spuds. Some Flyers highlights from the game include a strong outing by starting pitcher Andres Gonzalez and relievers Felix Camargo, Tony Giles, and Neil Davies. Those 4 are going to need to be good for this year if the Flyers want to reach their goals. Manny Toledo also hit his first spring home run in this game after setting the all-time franchise record with 42 in the regular season last year. Game 2 was a 5-3 win against the Edmonton Jackrabbits. Buonu Minaki, Patrick Rasmussen, and Pete Benoit all pitched very well, and Victor Frazier hit a home run. The team's other home run came from 2057 fifth-round draft pick Shuyan Zhang, who, by the way, needs to work on his defense, but offensively, Zhang looks like a guy who could probably play a platoon role in the BBA right now. Game 3 was a 3-1 loss to the Brooklyn Robins. Fuad Demirel hit his first spring homer, and Carl Vincent pitched well before leaving the game with the injury I mentioned earlier in the show. Game 4 was a 5-3 loss to the Phoenix Talons. Little Johnny Rasmussen got knocked around in his first outing in the spring, but youngsters Putra the Snake, Karsu Maja, and Andrew McLean, and veteran Chris Lacey all had solid outings out of the pen. The big news in this one was the injury sustained by new Phoenix shortstop Niaz Minas. He was hurt running the bases and will be out for 3 to 4 weeks. Game 5 was another loss. This time, it was 5-3 to Rocky Mountain. Fawaz Amin hit his first home run of the preseason in this one. Yamashita struggled on the mound, allowing 5 runs in a little over 3 innings of work. But then a pair of young pitchers, Tsuyoshi Mori and Walt Cuero, finished the game out with a pair of scoreless innings. Amin is an interesting player to watch this spring. There are reports that the team is concerned with Toledo's defense at first base this spring. The original plan going into the preseason was to have Amin DH against right-handed pitching. However, if Toledo ends up as the full-time designated hitter, that might mean that Amin becomes the odd man out. Game 6 was yet another loss. This one was a 13-6 blowout against Rockville. The Pikemen hit a pair of home runs off of Josh Clark and continued the offensive onslaught against the bullpen. Probably the biggest bright spot for Charlotte was the 2-hit performance by Robert Menzies, including his first homer of the spring. Game 7 was a 5-4 win against the Montreal Blazers. Menzies was 3 for 3 with another home run in this one, and Andres Gonzalez turned in another solid performance. Stout and Davies also pitched well again. Dallas Dixon and Jeremy Tucker each homered in Game 8, a 9-5 loss to the Mexico City Aztecs. Minaki was not as good this time out, walking 4, but Ron Christian and the Snake both pitched effectively out of the pen. Shuyan Zhang was 2 for 3 in this one as well. Game 9 was a 5-3 loss to the San Antonio Outlaws. Little Johnny pitched well for 4 innings, but it all fell apart for him in the 5th, and he allowed all 5 runs without recording an out in that frame. Menzies hit his 3rd home run of the spring, and Tadataka Yoshikawa also drove in a couple of runs in the loss. The last game I'll talk about today was a 4-1 loss to the Calgary Pioneers. Yamashita struggled again, but Stanovich and Cuero were both solid out of the pen. Okay, now I want to take a look at the roster with about 3 weeks left in the preseason. I'll start with the position players. The catcher position is still up for grabs at this point. Will Bennett, who has good framing skills but a weak arm, has hit well so far in the spring with a .364 average and an RBI. Lefty Hiba Majalawa is a more balanced defender, but has really struggled to find anything offensively so far, hitting only .167. He did have 2 hits against Rockville, but only has 1 hit in his other 14 at-bats. Jeremy Tucker is a solid defender, but he has only come up to the plate 5 times in the spring thus far. In those 5 plate appearances, he has 3 hits, 1 walk, a home run, and 2 RBI. I'd guess he gets a few more at-bats in the next few days. Lawrence Stewart seems to be in camp as more of a learning experience at this point. He's only appeared in 1 game and is 0 for 1 at the plate. All right, as I mentioned earlier, Manny Toledo's defense has become a concern. It sounds like the team is seriously considering moving him to DH and letting Tadataka Yoshikawa move over to first, where he looked good in limited action in 2057. Dallas Dixon will be the starting second baseman this year. The team brought him in for a reason, and he's making a lot of money. No one is really concerned with his 182 spring batting average. Robert Menzies will start at shortstop if he can stay healthy. There is absolutely no question about that. His .562 average with 3 home runs in the first 10 games of the preseason are just a bonus. Third base belongs to Banger Dan. He has hit pretty well so far in spring with a .294 average. The battle for backup infield spots is an interesting one. Andy Bishop is pretty much a lock after the way he played during his rookie campaign. He figures to get playing time at both second and short during the year. He's also come out swinging the bat well in the preseason, hitting .316 with 4 RBI so far. Tom Bates has spent time at both corner and field positions over the last couple of seasons. He only has 1 hit in his first 17 spring at-bats. While Jesus Diaz hasn't been great offensively, hitting only .176, his ability to play second and short at a high level may give him an edge over Bates when the final decision is made, unless Bates makes it clear that his bat is indispensable. The outfield picture has changed with the likely move of Yoshikawa from left field to first base. The general consensus was that there were more outfielders than needed on the team, making it difficult to see a pathway to consistent bats for a few of them. Now, it looks a little more clear. Chris McFadden will likely start most games in right field. After winning the Zimmer there in 2057, it wouldn't make much sense to move him. Center field belongs to Victor Frazier, another Zimmer winner, every time there is a right-handed pitcher on the mound. Last season, he started out playing every day, but his offensive struggles against southpaws forced the team to switch things up. Fuad Demirel will start against right-handed pitching in left field. He's the team captain and is a productive player on the field, last season finishing with a WRC plus of 108. Kayuchi Mori is a lock to make the team as well. The most likely scenario is that he starts in left field against left-handers and fills in right field when McFadden needs a day off. The other position players who are vying for roster spots are the previously mentioned Fawaz Amin and right-handed defense first center fielders Mick Scott and Lau Kum. Amin is not a good fielder, so the apparent switch at DH may leave him off the roster or consigned to left-handed pinch hitting duties. Scott is a little more versatile of a player than Coombe, and he's been hitting better as well. Coombe has only 3 hits and 1 walk in 17 plate appearances. Scott is hitting .294 with a couple of walks and 3 RBI so far in the spring. All right, now let's take a look at the pitching staff. Andres Gonzalez, Buoni Minaki, Little Johnny Rasmussen, and Carl Vincent, once he returns from his injury, seem like locks for the starting rotation. Tokugawa Yamashita seems like he has a good chance to break camp in the rotation as well, specifically with Vincent hurt. The role of 5th starter is still up for grabs, though, at least until Vincent returns. The team would like to see Josh Clark take control of that spot, but he hasn't been able to do so. Allowing 7 runs in his first spring start is a step in the wrong direction for him. Other possible candidates for that spot could be Chris Lacey, Georgi Stanovich, or Jerry Stout. It's also possible there's a surprise choice made from one of the younger guys, or another pitcher brought in with the cap space freed up by the best release. The bullpen's really hard to predict at this point. I think we're going to need another week or 2 before that picture starts to clear up. There are a few guys who seem to be locks, however. Neil Davies, Felix Camargo, Pete Benoit, and Tony Giles all seem like good bets to make the team. Chris Lacey and Patrick Rasmussen seem to also have a pretty good chance. I'm hearing that Brian Longstaff and Antonio Cuartas are 2 pitchers who, from last year's team, that need to pitch pretty well in the preseason to be able to make the squad. There are just too many more guys in a front office saying they want competition to be the driving force of these decisions to have a strong feeling about where things end up. With all that said, I do believe that this bullpen has a chance to be a lot better than what they had last year. All right, that does it for this inaugural episode of Flight Tracker. I hope you enjoyed this look at the 2057 offseason and the first few games of spring training for 2058. Join us next time on Flight Tracker.